when they behold the beast that was, is not, yet is. Gives us information. Let's look at it. It's interesting. Interpretation 1. If we look at it from the time of John, the 7 heads represent the principal persecuting powers of God's people over the ages. This is one interpretation. 5 have fallen. They say Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. 5 have fallen. 1 is, well, looking at it from the time of John, that would be Rome. The other is not yet come. That's the papacy. That's one interpretation that's quite popular, and many people adhere to it. And I have no problem if anybody wants to adhere to it, because we end up with this final power, which obviously is the one that causes all the problems. The only problem
The
that
Vatican.
we have with this interpretation is, which powers do you leave out over here? Because Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece are the ones that are mentioned. And you're starting with the time of John. So that's an assumption you make in order to unravel this prophecy. But which ones do you leave out? For example, if you go to Ezekiel 16:26 and you look at the enemies of God, you had the Egyptians, you had the Philistines, you had the Assyrians, you had the Chaldeans. So in that interpretation, the Philistines, for example, are left out. What if I didn't want to leave them out? Then my numbers would be wrong, right? So personally, I don't have a problem with the main structure, but the details don't quite satisfy me. Identification of the 7 heads, interpretation 2. Using Daniel now as a template, which seems to be logical because the book of Revelation uses the symbolism in the book of Daniel to transfer it to this situation that it describes in Revelation. So using Daniel as a template, some start with Babylon and count from the time of the events portrayed in Revelation 17. So again, you have to make a decision. Now, where do we start? With the events starting in Revelation 17. 5 have fallen. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, papacy. 1 is the wounded papacy. Now you're starting with the time in Revelation 17 where he says 1 is. So that's the time. So they get to Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, papacy. 1 is, that would be the wounded papacy. Not yet come would be the final confederacy under the papacy, because his mortal wound will heal and all the world will follow him.
New World Order forming.
Nice interpretation. I have no major problem with that. I only have one little question. What about the other powers mentioned in the book of Revelation? How do you fit them in then? Then you have to leave out some of the other beasts, the 2-horned beast and all of those. So what do we do to incorporate them? And the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which thou saw was, is not, shall ascend. Where does it descend from? Bottomless pit. Now, which other beast descended from the bottomless pit? The one in Revelation chapter 11. Remember that? The one that starts making war on the Word of God, the whole philosophy of the French Revolution, all of that. Going to perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundations of the world, when they behold the beast that was, is not, yet is. 7 kings, 5 have fallen, and then you have this little bit of information here. And the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. And he is of the 7, and goes into perdition. A little bit more detail. So the 8th, he goes into perdition, but actually the 8th is part of the 7. Let's fit that together. Interpretation number 3. Using Daniel as a template, let's start with Babylon and count from the time of the events portrayed in Revelation 17, so much like the previous one. So, 5 have fallen. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, papacy. That's a religio-political power that ruled over the Middle Ages. So that's where you get to, starting with the events portrayed in Revelation 17. One is, a seemingly wounded papacy is not, it says, yet is. It seemed to have a mortal wound. Do you remember that? And we saw that it actually grew and that the Jesuit organizations built up a whole world empire. In that time, communism, all these things developed in this not is stage. So seemingly wounded papacy is not yet. That's a religio-political powers run by secret papal societies arising from the bottomless pit in Revelation 11. That's what happened during the not yet phase. Not yet come, the image of the beast. That's the religio-political confederacy under the lamb-like beast. The 8th is of the 7. That would be a new world order, a final world confederacy under the papacy. Now, this one is not much different from the previous one. And whether we like the previous one or this one, it doesn't really matter to me. Personally, that's how I would like to put it together myself. But I'm not hooked on it. I mean, it doesn't really matter as long as the final one ends up to be the papacy, because he arises then and he goes to perdition. But this one, for me, includes all the images that we have in the book of Revelation. So this is what I presume it might mean. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet. So if this is the stage where we're talking, this is not stage, and there are 10 that have not yet received a kingdom, and that's future, then what does this 10 stand for? But receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. There must be some confederacy, so 10 could mean the number of completeness, all the kingdoms of the world giving their power to the beast, or it could be something else. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. And these shall make war with the Lamb. This is the persecuting power at the end. And the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they are with him, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So here's the final battle that will take place. On September 17, 1973, the Club of Rome published a special, highly confidential report called the Regionalized and Adaptive Model of the Global World System. Fascinating stuff, which was sent to the power elite to be implemented. This document reveals that the club has divided the world into 10 political economic regions, which it refers to as kingdoms. A designation that tracks eerily with the terminology used in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, 1-2. In 1974, the authors of the report, Nialio, Mazurik, blah, 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 Pestel, published their final findings in a book, Mankind at the Turning Point. However, in this book, which is intended for public consumption, they have dropped the word kingdom. This comes from a very good source, and Route to Global Occupation, Gary H. Carr. So the world is being divided into 10 regions. Did you know that there are certain monarchies left and certain royal families in the world? Some interesting stuff that we might be talking about in the next lectures to come. And he says unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitters are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Wow! So first we have the kingdoms of the world giving their power unto this beast, unto this religious system, and then this religious system goes and makes war against God's people. What happens next? Any idea? God puts a hedge around his people. He protects them. He holds them in the palm of his hand, just like he did in Egypt. And they legislate against them. They cannot buy, they cannot sell, they can do nothing. Your bread and your water shall be sure. 1,000 shall fall by your side, 10,000 at your right hand, it will not come near you. All the promises of God apply. Eventually, they try in their anger to eradicate this group that clings to doctrines contrary to world doctrines. And God sends plagues. And there is much suffering on earth. And God's people are hedged. Eventually, even these powers realize that they have been what? Duped. And they turn with bitter hatred and aggression and destroy the very one that tried to destroy God's people. That's what it says. That's what it says. Fascinating stuff. Now notice, very interesting.